The talks on setting up a unity government between Zimbabwe President Robert Mugabe and opposition party leader Morgan Tsvangirai have gone nowhere. The framework agreement signed between their parties in September came after Morgan Tsvangirai had dropped out of a presidential runoff, citing state-sponsored violence against opposition workers. For weeks, the two sides have been deadlocked over how to allocate key cabinet positions. Tsvangirai has been pushing Mr. Mugabe to split control of the ministry that controls the police.
We have been victims of this regime's repressive regime. And therefore, unless you are able to share those security ministries, you are allowing Mugabe to have a monopoly over these institutions, and he can always use those institutions against the opposition.
President Mugabe has so far been unwilling to share control of the police. Now he's facing increased pressure to reach a deal. On Thursday, South Africa said it would withhold nearly $30 million in agriculture aid until the country has a unity government in place. Meanwhile, James McGee, the U.S. ambassador to Zimbabwe, spoke by teleconference to reporters in Washington. He accused Mr. Mugabe of resisting change.
He's made it clear that he is not easily going to give up power here in Zimbabwe. And Mugabe has pretty much said that Morgan Tsvangirai would never sit in a government here in Zimbabwe with any true power.
As the political stalemate drags on, Zimbabwe is facing a humanitarian crisis. Aid organizations say a massive food shortage is gripping the country, and half the population will need food aid by the end of the year. Zimbabwean journalist Hopewell Chinono, speaking in Washington, said his country's health system has collapsed.
The health situation in Zimbabwe has deteriorated to a point where doctors and nurses are not going to work, and hospitals have been closed. There's no medication in hospitals, so people are just getting sick at home and dying at home.
Earlier this week, doctors and nurses took to the streets in the capital Harare to protest worsening conditions and the closure of two main hospitals. The demonstrations were quickly broken up by police. Outside of the Zimbabwean embassy here in Washington, it's business as usual. But U.S. State Department officials are warning President Robert Mugabe and his government that unless he shares power with opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai, the U.S. is prepared to roll out more economic sanctions against Zimbabwe. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Washington.